Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Total Soccer Show. My name is Taylor Rockwell, and it's Tuesday, which means it's time to do some MLS updating. We're talking Miami, we're talking LA, we're talking Rivalry Week. We have talked Miami and LA before, but it's worth going into their respective fates again. We'll talk a little LAFC, but mostly the Galaxy and their new old coach. That's how I'm going to phrase it. With me today to talk it all out is a man who hasn't coached the Galaxy to a win this season, but unfortunately is not also their highest paid coach in the league. It's Joe Lowery. Hello, Joe.
You know, it's tough. I was hoping for that new contract. Will Kuntz just wouldn't toss that deal my way, despite my pleading. I do want to say up front, because you got to it well in the intro, Taylor. We are talking Miami. We are talking about the Galaxy. We don't have a super strong appetite to do those things over and over and over again. It just so happens that these two clubs have done yet another batch of newsworthy things, which we'll get to. We will also talk about other stuff on this episode, and we will talk about other things in future weeks. But we hope that you at least enjoy our conversation about some of these newsworthy things, because I think they really are worth talking about.
Yeah, when the team with Lionel Messi and friends is continuing to struggle in ridiculous fashion, you probably have to talk about it. When the reigning MLS Cup champions have started winless but renewed their coach, you probably have to talk about it. Rounding out the crew to do so is a man who knows that left back isn't all that important when it comes to defending. It's Jeff Rueter. Hello, Jeff.
I love an episode of a podcast that begins with apologies.
Yeah. I mean,
yep.
we are aware how much people who care about MLS, who watch MLS, who listen to coverage of MLS are maybe inundated, flooded, if you will, with Inter Miami and Messi conversation. And if it's not that, then it is oftentimes the Galaxy. And so we have tried to kind of balance things. I think that has been the goal of our MLS update, our weekly coverage, is to go around the league and look at some teams that we maybe don't get talked about as much or deserve more coverage. And we've done that to some extent. But lately it has been a lot of Miami and LA, the Galaxy specifically, I should clarify, because they, as Joe said, keep doing noteworthy things, interesting things, not necessarily interesting things in a good way. Joe, what did Inter Miami do this weekend?
I was just trying to think of the best defensive left back in Major League Soccer, and I'm not sure I'm coming up with a lot of ironclad names. Does Nuhu maybe end up on this list somewhere? To actually answer your question, Taylor, Miami losing 3-0 to Orlando City at home over the weekend. This was on Sunday, the last game of the weekend slate. The loss was notable, and how it came about was a continuation of some trends that have really plagued Miami throughout the entire season, and certainly over the last 6 weeks or so. The real storyline, though, came post-game, although there are some pre-game storylines as well that I want to hit on. The real storyline came post-game when Lionel Messi gave a super rare interview to Michele Giannone of Apple TV and MLS Season Pass. Messi, for context, and listeners probably know this, never talks. You don't read quotes from Messi in the media. You don't see clips of him giving interviews. He does not give interviews. You can probably count on one hand the number of times he's talked to the media since he got to Miami, and that is now almost 2 years ago. So he came over and chatted with Michele Giannone and talked a little bit about how difficult the stretch has been for Inter Miami, where they've been really struggling. I think it's 5 losses in their last 7 games. It's been a really brutal stretch for Inter Miami right now. But he didn't just talk about the losses for Inter Miami. He also talked about the challenges that Miami had with the refereeing, and just straight up complained about MLS refereeing as a whole, and more specifically, the center referee for Miami's loss against Orlando, Guido Gonzalez Jr. He said that the referee didn't know the rule, referring to a potential back pass from Ivan Angulo to Pedro Gaese. He said that MLS has to look at some of the officiating. These are direct quotes, although they've been translated from Spanish to English. So, there's a little bit of fudging there, but you get the idea. Messi came out, and the whole reason he wanted to talk, even though he tried to clarify it with, we're not making excuses. He was. The whole reason he came out to talk is because he wanted to uncork one on Guido Gonzalez Jr., and he's angry. He's frustrated that Miami aren't winning, and he's decided to take that frustration out on MLS and MLS officiating. The best part of this, and then I'll get off my soapbox. The best part of this is that MLS had tweeted out the entire interview because Messi talks, and that's going to do numbers. And you post these kinds of interviews, even if it's not Messi, you post them on social media, you post them and you air them everywhere you can. And then apparently maybe they realized what Messi had said, which was that he criticized the league and its officiating. They took it down, and then they put up the part of the interview with Michele that did not include that bit of comment from Lionel Messi. So
it was just stitched together parts of him being like, MLS is the best league. Like it was pretty clear what was happening.
I mean, it's ridiculous from MLS. I mean, I can understand that they're not thrilled with the greatest player of all time coming out and criticizing an aspect of what they do. I get that. But he said it, and I think you look even more foolish by going out there and trying to cover your tracks haphazardly. So the whole thing's wild. Messi's complaining. It's irritating. He has no grounds, except he is the GOAT. So there's that.
Is there validity? Do either of you think there's validity to the frustrations Miami are having with the officials? Is there some truth in there to what he is saying, or do you feel like it is a lot of frustration being sort of taken out on the officials? Because I don't think anyone has ever really left the game and been like, that guy nailed it. Every single call correct. Maybe
Right.
Occasionally, oftentimes I think the officials get the abuse. Is there any truth to what he's saying?
No, I think for a team that's full of like ex-FC Barcelona DNA, it's rich that they're like tapping into the playbook of Jose Mourinho.
Totally.
Which like good alternative history, right? But no, I mean, you look at how Miami is being fouled commensurate to the rest of the league, and it's like 18th of 30 most times fouled, and like 12th of 30 or 13th of 30 in fouls committed. They're like fouls committed per yellow card is like right in line with every other. So like if you just look purely at like, we have enough of a sample size where you can generally see how referees are calling games this season, right? And I think it's also worth mentioning, we didn't have much of like ref criticism in 2024 because there's two different eras of the season.
Yeah.
There is the referee strike when there was a lot of complaints that was kind of like thinly veiled, like just sign the deal so we can get back to your usual refs rhetoric, right? And then you had afterward where they were just like, let's just kind of take some time off of this sort of thing, and we're just glad they're back because it's better than what the alternative was with people who are trying their best but have never worked at something close to this level before. So it's a kind of return to that, and so it looks different. But I will say that like since I was talking about this with some friends, like pretty much since he got to Paris Saint-Germain, that's pretty much when the switch flipped with Messi, and he started to go after refs a little bit more. And I'm not sure what it is. I don't know if maybe there's just something of like, well, I'm no longer the club legend, I'm just the most famous guy here, where you can kind of change your persona a little bit, and maybe it's just a little easier to say, I am here. It's a little bit more of a mercenary era where I'm here to do a task, and once the task is done, and if you're in my way, I will call it out. But no, I think overall when you look, it's a shame. Like, it's one of those balls, you see it a lot of times where referees seldom will call this a back pass because it's unintentional contact, right? So yes, it does come off of an Orlando player, to go back to Pedro Gallese. And so I understand wanting the ref to look at it, but every goal is reviewed. Every single goal in Major League Soccer is looked at by VAR. Most of them don't tell the center official, hey, stop the restart, we're still watching, unless there is something controversial. But every goal is double checked just to make sure that it's valid. So like, no, I think that this is sour grapes for a team that expected this season to go a lot easier than it has for them so far.
Yeah, I completely agree with Jeff. So to walk through the play in its entirety, because I think I've said it on the show before, I don't have a lot of time for like relitigating referee controversy and all this stuff. The hook is that Messi's whining about it and that it's directly impacted Miami, because this whole play is Ivan Angulo, and Jeff described it well. He ends up touching the ball, and I can see a world in which Angulo is sort of trying to direct that ball back to Gallese, but it comes off his foot weird, and there's I don't know, I think it's Schlegel who's over there as well, and the ball ends up just sort of bouncing over to Gallese, and he picks it up, and Messi is up in arms, literally, like he's tossing his arms up in the air, he's complaining about it. He's not the only one. It's Messi and some of his other more advanced teammates who are like stopped. And what do Orlando City do? They continue to play, as you should, because the whistle is not blown, and they boot the ball downfield to Luis Muriel, who races in behind Miami's back line, beats their flat-footed, semi-efforted offside trap, and runs down and scores on Oscar Ustari, and it's 1-0 Orlando. And that's why Messi was so mad. This wasn't just a run-of-the-mill, it should have been a back pass, or I want to complain about a free kick we didn't get, although he will do those things, perhaps just not in a post-game media hit. But this was Messi directly attributing that mistake in the referee Guido Gonzalez Jr., as Messi told everybody, telling Messi that he didn't know the rule, which is ridiculous.
He himself told me. Right,
right. It's those things leading to the first domino that toppled Inter Miami in this game, and that embarrassed them in front of their home fans. They've been embarrassed over and over and over again. Again, 5 losses from their last 7 across all competitions. It's horrible. Like that. This is an embarrassing stretch for Inter Miami. There's no way around it. And Messi's feeling that, and he wanted to hit out at that. The thing that got me, and I hadn't even clocked this when I posted this clip on Twitter, because I think it is, and on Blue Sky, I think this is the microcosm of Miami in 2025 so far, is them complaining at one end and conceding at the other seconds later. That was this whole sequence. And I put it out on social media, and someone responded, the most hilarious part of all this is that it was Luis Muriel beating Miami's high line and going to score. This is 34-year-old Luis Muriel, who is not the fleetest of foot, is not the most agile of human beings. And I hadn't even clocked that it was Muriel. I was so busy thinking about, like, oh, Miami get beaten by a runner in behind, that it is, again, a Serie A veteran, guy who's well past his prime at this point, that toasted their back line. It's ridiculous. Like, Taylor, you joked about the left back spot for Miami. That's a problem. They can't defend at left back, to the point where Mascherano put another center back on the field in this game, and they went 5 at the back and sort of played this 3-4-3 or 5-2-3, depending on the phase of play. Didn't matter. Alex Freeman and Marco Pasalic on the right and direct runs from the left just tore Miami apart. And that might have happened even if they hadn't been stuck complaining and completely checked out of this first goal sequence, because later on in the game, Oscar Ustari just gets 5-hold. It is a true howler for a goalkeeper who's been the second worst goalkeeper in MLS based off of goals allowed above expected this year. John McCarthy is the worst. Not a huge surprise there. Ustari has been terrible for this team. Ustari was signed because he's Messi's friend. He played with Messi at youth level 20 years ago with Argentina. Played at a U20 World Cup, I believe. Played at the Olympics with Messi. The guys are friends. They signed him last year. He's back this year. He started over Drake Callender by coach's decision, even though Drake Callender was excellent last season. And now, when they would want to move back to Drake Callender, they can't because he's hurt. It is so ironic and so perfectly cruel and just for this Miami team that they've shot themselves in the foot so many times that they can no longer get that foot back and actually put it on the bottom of their leg. It's hilarious, absurd. I've got my popcorn, man.
So it leads me to a theory. I welcome you all both to rate it on a 1 to 10 of how much you're buying it. But like Jeff, you mentioned Messi going to PSG and then maybe starting to get more critical of the officials, and I think of that PSG team as somewhat too particularly dysfunctional. When you have a front three that isn't going to defend, that you're going to have this kind of like disjointed, stilted way of playing then, and when you have obvious issues within the team, sometimes a manager, sometimes a key player can sort of start calling people out and recognize that things aren't going your way and that changes have to happen and make tough decisions. Or you can look for a scapegoat, and officials are an easy scapegoat, and that is what this looks like to me as well, is a team that, like, maybe you need to have a conversation with Jordi Alba about his defensive liability, or maybe you need to have a conversation with other players about maybe not getting 5-hold, or tracking back better, or completing a pass. And it's difficult conversations already, further compounded by the fact that these are all kind of friends, that Javier Mascherano is friends with these players as well as their coach. Right. And I do wonder if there is dysfunction in there, dysfunction breeding, that isn't really being checked, and so instead you have it sort of vented towards the officials. That is what this felt like to me in that interview, was we know things aren't right, but it's the referee's fault. It's not our fault. We don't need to really look too deeply at this team because other factors deserve the blame, and that is where I sort of saw this one going. Do either of you buy that one, or do you disagree entirely?
I buy it. I completely buy it. And again, this is weirdly like Mourinho-esque, which is just so funny. And I think that the biggest difference between the PSG project, which was always built something like an NBA super team where we're going to sign our big three and then we're going to need some time to get the balance right with the rest of the squad, and the rest of it is constantly going to be in flux. We're going to sell a midfielder who's more of a high touch volume sort of guy, and we're going to, transfer him away and then bring in someone who's more off ball or whatever the case is. And it's going to take some time, but we have the front three where we're going to be competitive on all fronts and we'll win most trophies on offer, right? That's the PSG project that didn't work with Neymar and Kylian Mbappe along with Lionel Messi, right? The difference with Inter Miami, when I think of this, is I don't think that they expected this much turmoil. I think that was a big part of the selling point for a lot of players of their caliber who are coming in this advanced later stage of their career. I think a lot of it is, I can go to Publix and I can pick out boxes of cereal. And yeah, some fans are going to show up with some cell phones, but like I can still shop and I'm not going to get my entire family harassed, right? Or like we can go and we can have a preseason in Los Angeles area maybe, or where, they do their tours or whatever, right? But like you're going to go to a different location. You'll have an entire month where it's Mascherano and Busquets and Suarez and Alba and Ustari, one of the boys, I guess, and Messi, all, sipping mate and doing all this other stuff. Like it sounds great, right? Like I get it. But at the same point, then when this stuff happens and you feel like we should be so much better than this. And I have never heard of most of the guys who are scoring on us. Like, you're going to get frustrated in such a like weirdly specific grumpy old man watching the world pass you by sort of way.
Yeah.
And it's just giving a lot of that. Like, I know 2 weeks ago I had said that I was like off the Miami as a front runner for MLS Cup sort of conversation, and I feel even stronger about it now, which is great. But like, you look and it's, I wrote something for The Athletic last week about the defensive issues with Jordi Alba, right? And I was looking at
that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so okay, go ahead. I mean, like, I want to make sure that
Jeff's like, tell me how good it was, Taylor. If
please, I don't know how many people read these things.
To be
sometimes.
fair, I was going to reference it as Joe. I read a piece in The Athletic written by some guy I'm not familiar with.
Gotcha.
But it's essentially, Jeff, you could say it better than I could, certainly. But my read was Jordi Alba, in all caps, is maybe an issue.
Yes.
Being asked to do a lot of attacking, but then also not really being as efficient or as effective in that attack, but then still being as not efficient and not as effective in the defensive side of things as we expect him to be, leaving huge obvious areas for other teams to attack, then having a veteran, to put it nicely, goalkeeper who maybe isn't improving things. There was
he's terrible.
Goal percentage rate was an interesting one to me, or goal prevention rate, excuse me. Was an interesting one. But largely it's basically don't have defensive cover and then don't have the kind of role players, the squad players who are doing the hard work, doing the hard running, doing the less glorious stuff, the less glorified stuff. That is also going to attract the attention of one or two or three defenders. That then opens up space for your critical difference makers.
And I think you did great. And I think that the biggest issue with Alba is that, like, he's just chasing the ball right now. Like, I compared it to a dog who found a frisbee in the sky, right? And like, I don't know exactly how I'm going to get to that frisbee, but I'm going to try. Even if my course is wrong, I'm just going to continue chasing this thing, and I don't really care what I'm leaving behind, and everyone will be very stressed.
It's not just dogs that struggle to
running.
read the paths of frisbees, Jeff. I'm just going to say.
I know, right? It's tough, especially if you have a wind gust, right?
100%.
Totally. So, yeah, I mean, like, it's just, it's the sort of defending you just do not expect from, like, a 36-year-old who's won just about everything a player can win in their career. Like, just, like, it boggles the mind. And I think it would be one thing if this were a series of those sort of rotational squad guys who are coming and going, who continue to get it wrong defensively and are making these mistakes, but they only have $200,000 of salary and a non-international, non-senior roster slot available to fill, so they're making compromises compared to who they want. This is Jordi Alba. This is one of your headliners. This is a guy that you just re-signed to a new deal through the end of the 2027 season on designated player terms. So you're also pretty much committing to playing this guy every game, even if you don't start him, and sacrificing on being able to sign guys like Kevin De Bruyne or anyone else who's going to command that DP salary. It just, like, it boggles the mind. I don't understand the benefits and trade-off in this one.
Jeff, you mentioned that Jordi Alba is going to be a DP. Is that something you've heard? Is that happening?
Yeah, that was something Paul Tenorio was able to confirm and reported around the extension, which is just like, way to go, Paul. But, like, what are you doing, Miami?
Well, yeah. So this is where I was going to go, because we know that Jordi Alba is a bad defender at this point. I thought it was interesting that, like I mentioned, Mascherano went back 5 in this game. I also thought it was interesting, as a quick sidebar, that it was Ian Frey that he selected as his team's right wing back. Ian Frey is an interesting player in that he's super lanky. He's tall. He's got a huge stride. I can understand in theory why you would look at him and think, okay, this guy can give us something going forward. He cannot, unfortunately, because he is a little Bambi-esque on the ball, just because he doesn't have a lot of experience doing those things. He has played more as a center back in his career than he has as an outside back, and has not played much as a wing back, though we have seen it on occasion this year. Why you're going with an extremely defensive option on that side when that right side from Miami is going up against Ivan Angulo, who is Orlando's worst attacker by a mile, and David Brecalo, who's playing at left back, who is a left-sided center back in possession and never goes forward. Why Mascherano is starting Ian Frey as a right wing back against two guys that are not a threat to come at you makes zero sense to me. Truly, Fafa Picault sitting on your bench, I understand that you need to cover for Jordi Alba. And I understand that Picault is not the player he used to be. There's other guys. Like, there was something else that could have been done here, and I feel like that was a huge thing left on the table. On the Alba discussion, I don't think you can look at Jordi Alba and think, yeah, we're stoked to have this guy to the end of 2027. It is, unless you're an opposing right winger, in which case you're thrilled.
Right, yeah.
But if you're into Miami, the thing that you have to think of next is Messi's coming back. And I think that is the logical progression. Mascherano talked on Apple TV prior to this disastrous game. And he said, quote, "To sign Jordy for the next 2 years is important to show stability. And hopefully in a few weeks we can have some news about Leo. I think it will be very, very important for the club, the fans, and for MLS." I mean, I know Messi was asked about his contract by Michele after the game, and he just said, no. There's no update, basically no. Messi's coming back, or at least it sure seems like it, and signing Jordi Alba apparently is the price you pay for getting Messi back in. It also seems like, to just round up the transfer news from Miami, Michele, getting a lot of love on this show, Michele, come on sometime. Michele said pregame, doing a hit on the sidelines, that Inter Miami are planning to take advantage of that 10-day Club World Cup exclusive transfer window that U.S. Soccer has just approved. Only the MLS teams participating in the Club World Cup will have access to that. So that's Miami, Seattle, maybe LAFC. We'll find out on the 31st. Miami are, according to Michele, looking to use that window to sign 2 new attackers, or at least they're looking at 2 new attackers. And he mentioned NL Di Maria by name, which, I mean, I don't know how you look at this team and think, oh yeah, NL Di Maria is going to solve all our problems. But Miami are looking at it that way, and I am thrilled about it because this is great TV, folks.
Oh, boy. That is going to be fascinating and awesome to see them have 7 players committed to the attack and maybe some in defense. We'll see how it goes.
Maybe.
I do have one more question for you all about Inter Miami, but I'm going to make you all wait to answer until after the break. So we'll take a break. We'll come back. We'll talk about Inter Miami a bit more. Then we'll get to the Galaxy and Rivalry Week to follow. Back soon. Welcome back, everybody. Before the break, I teased a question. It is my final question. If Inter Miami were to ask you all, like, how do we make this better? Not the whole thing, necessarily, but if they are looking for players, like, what is the model of player? Who are some of the players you think that they should be targeting that could just do some of that hard running, the heavy lifting that maybe some of their team aren't capable of doing? They moved on a lot of guys who are younger, who are maybe more in their prime, but are also less glamorous and maybe happier to be in that team, but happier to work hard to stay in that team. You don't have as many Robert Taylors or Julian Gressels or Leo Cabañas or the like. So what do you do to make up? Who are the players in Major League Soccer you think would be good models for for Inter Miami to look at?
Probably guys Javier Mascherano has never heard of before.
That checks out.
Like, that's just what the issue seems to come back to, is like, oh, this guy, yeah, we used to play with him. I'm sure he'd have a great time here. I'm sure that he'd fit in great. I'm sure tactically it would be sound and that his legs would be up for the game state of Major League Soccer. I mean, like, I don't know. Every team has 5 of these guys for the most part, except for Inter Miami right now, which is really funny. Like, I think that they miss DeAndre Yedlin when we have a right wing back discussion, right? And like, he's a different player than he was in Seattle, and like with the Jurgen Klinsmann boom and going to England and all that stuff. I get it. He's a veteran at this point, but he's smart and he understands the league and he understands what it takes to turn a loss into a draw in Major League Soccer. And right now, that's kind of a thing that this team needs to do. They look so deflated as soon as they concede once. And that's not super club behavior. That, like, I think that they need Kyle Beckerman. Like, that's like the number one thing I can think of. Just someone who's actually going to do the hard yards in midfield and do the thankless stuff and be like the greatest MLS player at all time at the tactical foul, right? And just like the not draw a yellow card but constantly tug the jersey just enough in transition to slow down the counterattack. Like, no one did that sort of stuff better. And I think right now, with how that defense is getting overrun, having someone in midfield who could kind of do that sweeping in a mid-block before it even gets to the point where the defensive line is scrambling because Jordi Alba has completely forgotten where he was asked to be at the start of his contract in 2023. I think that would help. I think Kyle Beckerman would help a lot.
It's wild that Jeff said obviously dreads. Jeff said 2 different positions that I wasn't thinking about, and he's correct about both of them. And now I'm going to add in maybe 4 different positions to the equation.
Yeah, they need a lot. They do.
I think they're still looking for a best-in-class center back, and they've tried. Yeah. They've swung over and over again. It wasn't Aviles. Christoph wasn't that player for them. Couldn't do it. Then you look at some players they've signed more recently. Lujan doesn't seem to be that guy. Noah Allen is certainly not that guy, even though he can be a useful player. Max Falcon is not that player. That they just don't have. That David Martinez brought in, he's not that player either. That would help them. I don't think they're going to find that player at this point. I was thinking about like just how much better Kai Wagner would make this team over Jordi Alba, where you still get best-in-class attacking production, and you actually get someone who's going to do something for you on the other end. I was thinking about goalkeeper, which is the most obvious and glaring need. If they can get Drake Callender back and healthy, I mean, they're probably not going to win the Shield at this point anyway. If you can get him back at some point post Club World Cup and carrying him into the playoffs with you, I think you're in a much better spot. The other thing is, and this is the reason why I'm like kind of a little bit tempted, not by Angel Di Maria, but by the idea of Miami going after an attacker, is that they still haven't figured out how to space properly in the attack, where Tadeo Allende is supposed to be the direct threat, and he was the direct threat of those three attackers they played, Messi, Suarez, Allende, against Orlando. But he's had maybe 2 good games this season. He scored a brace against San Jose midweek where Messi was also complaining about the refereeing after the game to the referee that was caught on broadcast. He had a good game there, has been just so inconsistent this year. Miami need a guy who's going to stretch the line and going to create space underneath for Messi and for Suarez, and is going to give them some of that off-ball movement that they just don't have. That would be a real priority for me because I think that's fixable in the way that goalkeeper is not quite fixable right now. That center back probably isn't fixable. Left back situation is not really going to change. That's probably where I would start, but I probably wouldn't start with Angel Di Maria.
And I think the only way it could work with Di Maria is if he's doing some of the spacing stuff you alluded to that Suarez was doing last year. Like, Suarez is just a shell of himself this year. Again, like in to such an extent that it is detrimental because he is undroppable unless he's out for personal reasons or whatever. But like at this point in MLS play, he is scoring a goal every 378 minutes, which is more than every 4 games. And that's not a strike rate that'll keep many strikers in a starting job in a first division league around the world, but it is working here. And I think it's a big issue because then it ultimately leaves Lionel Messi trying to do too much. And I think that for any player, even a player like him, like it's just like if you're having to do all of the chance generation for the most part, unless it's coming down the left flank from Jordi Alba, and you're having to take the bulk of shot volume, like it's asking for disaster at that point. And then your team shape's going to get even worse, and you're going to make rush decisions you usually wouldn't make in your usual flow state. So, yeah, it's a mess. I think that really pretty much every area of this team beyond its centerpiece could afford to be re-examined to make sure that it was functioning more coherently. That's how bad it's gotten right now.
Neither of you said the obvious answer, which is to do the LA Galaxy model of extend Javier Mascherano. That Correct. Is the thing that I think really needs to happen. We'll see if any of the players you all mentioned end up getting signed by ME, or if it ends up just being Angel Di Maria. Let's talk Greg Vanney and the Galaxy, and then El Trafico. Greg Vanney signed to a contract extension, Jeff. We all saw this coming, although you kind of did see it coming. It feels like it's been maybe a thing that they've been wanting to announce but haven't really had the form to do so. But now they have. Now everything's better.
It felt like they realized they ran out of time before El Trafico. Because it was like, if we lose at home to LAFC, there is no time in our season that we can announce this, right?
Yes. And so instead, we have Greg Vanney, new 3-year deal through 2028, makes him the highest paid coach without a dual sporting director title, according to the Athletics' Paul Tenorio, also getting a lot of love on this episode.
Hey, Paul.
And there are obvious reasons to make fun of this extension and to make fun of the Galaxy and to ponder the timing of it. To me, it is the Galaxy saying, this is not Greg Vanney's fault. This is a lot of other factors. He is not the issue here. And he has been put into a relatively thankless position, so we are going to thank him by giving him a bunch of money and show that we are not pointing fingers at him at all. That is my read on that one. Jeff, does that vibe with where you're coming from?
Yeah, that sounds about right. And there are extenuating circumstances around turning over the roster and needing more than one window to get cap compliant and good, right? Like, I think that they had to focus on the first part, and they didn't really have enough time or bandwidth or resources to really do the second. So that's on Will Kuntz to start doing in earnest more this summer and beyond. I think that, look, it's every club wants to find its Brian Schmetzer, right? I think that every club does want to have that sort of stable guiding voice where you do have continuity over extended passages of time. You don't have this sort of thing where the centerpiece designated player's tenure oversees 3 different coaches, so at a certain point it's very much their club, right? And you want to have just kind of a little bit more of that balance in middle management, I suppose, just on the org chart. But I think that when you look at it from a soccer standpoint, the players seem to love playing for him, right? And I think that when you look at when you look at the run to MLS Cup, right, there are some goal celebrations that go towards the bench and hug the coach, and that sort of stuff will always play, right? But I think that you also have El Trafico here, and wanting to score. Like, I mean, they played better than we've seen them play in a long time, I would argue. And I'm not saying that they looked like vintage Galaxy. They still looked like a team that probably won't make the playoffs. But they were able to hang in there with their biggest rival. They were able to come back after blowing a 1-goal lead to salvage a draw, which is good. They got Marco Reus playing like a player who could be the centerpiece of a team for pretty much the first time since signing him. So that's another like good tick in the box. You had a good exchange with Graham, I thought, on Monday's weekend recap of like, was this a draw that felt like a win or a draw that felt like a loss? And correct me if I'm wrong, you felt this was a draw that felt like a loss, yes, right? Like a missed opportunity where you had them, you pulled it back. There were some offside calls and other stuff where you could have had a match winner and that sort of thing. And how much of a long way that could have gone. I do agree with that, because I think that this could be. My answer to that would be it's inconclusive, and I need like exactly the next 2 games, and I will know if it was a win or a loss, right? Because I think that if they then turn this and say, hey, we can hang with LAFC, even when LAFC is finally getting into their rhythm, and we're not, but we can still keep them from getting a win at our house, okay, great. Well, now we have the mental resolve. We can tap into the pain caves or whatever, and go and get 4 points from our next 2, and suddenly everything's like back on course to a degree where it isn't a historic failure. Their goals this year should be, let's not set the record for fewest points in a season, which is 12, I believe, right now, and the most goals conceded, which is 80. Yeah, right now they're on a 7.4 point pace this season. So that's tough. Actually, I think now it's maybe more like 8.2, because I think that draw like helped them a little bit because they're close to the midpoint. But you know, they've got to save face this year. But I do admire a club wanting continuity when a coach has recently achieved something, and Greg Vanney undeniably has done so.
Yeah, and Will Kuntz came out and said, last week or after the contract was announced from Greg Vanney, that these conversations started between him and Greg at an MLS Cup after party, right? So they'd won, they're basking in the afterglow of winning MLS Cup, and they're starting to talk about it, and eventually haggled through all the different details here and put pen to paper. It's a difficult timing, all that. And it's funny. Like, all this is funny. It's comedic. The Miami thing's comedic. I'm having a good time. Yep. With Greg Vanney, Jeff covered a lot of it well. To be super specific about it, the players like playing for Greg Vanney. More than that, Ricky Puig likes playing for Greg Vanney. And when the Galaxy put out their message about this on Friday, raise the cup, the journey continues, Vanney's contract extended alongside key front office hires. They bring in Ravi Ramaneni, who's a longtime MLS analytics person who was with Seattle for a long time through some of their best years. Really interesting. Really interesting hire there. But on the Vanney front, Ricky Puig, who's super active on social media, quote tweets or whatever we're calling it these days, this Vanney announcement, and says, the journey isn't over yet. I came to LA to win titles just like we did last season. It wouldn't be the same without our coach by our side. We believe in the process. Let's keep pushing forward together. There is no message that needs to be read other than that one about this Greg Vanney situation.
That was
Ricky
not
Puig,
written by his publicist,
No, Ricky. This is Ricky's account. Like, Ricky's account is a beautiful thing. Yeah. Go check it out if you want to be over on that social media site. Ricky's profile picture is him in an LA Galaxy shirt. Ricky's banner on Twitter is 2 different pictures of Ricky Puig mocked up over the Los Angeles skyline with palm tree. The dude loves the LA Galaxy. Like, he actually loves being an LA Galaxy player. I have no doubt about that whatsoever. And Greg Vanney's a big part of that. So that Puig and Vanney are close. And sure, yes, Vanney has had more downs in LA than ups, right? But the up matters a lot last year with MLS Cup. I think he's largely coached to his talent level in Carson. I really do think that. This year, maybe notwithstanding, where the Galaxy should be better than they are and the wheels have just completely come off. But if keeping Vanney around for 3 more years keeps Ricky Puig around for 3 more years, happy and bought in, I would put pen to paper every single time without a single ounce of hesitation. I think this makes perfect sense. I don't think it's an ideal situation necessarily, but you got to do what you got to do, and you have to keep Ricky Puig around and bought in, and this helps you do that.
And rocking pinstripes, no less, to reference that for a second straight episode. Joe, where are you then on the idea that this felt like a loss or a win as a draw? Because I think the thing for me is just that if you are the Galaxy, having the start to the season they have had with the injuries they have had, but also just the kind of like stalling on occasion or just feeling like it's not fully clicking into gear, you get a win here and it's like, okay, there we go. Like, things can go our way. We can turn things around. We can get a result when it felt like we couldn't. But for it to be another draw with disallowed goals and missed opportunities, instead of that feeling like a point gained, in my mind, that's 2 points that could have kind of helped structure a turnaround. That's where I'm coming from with that one.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I struggle to like take a super strong stance here because the Galaxy season's over. Well, it doesn't matter if they win this game. They could have lost. Yeah. I mean, it just doesn't make any difference, right? Because their season crumpled up and put it in a trash can. We're 14 games through the season, and they've got how many points? They're on an 8 point per game pace. They're on 4 points right now.
You can still count it on one hand. Yeah.
Thank you, which is good for me. That's my math skills right there.
That's an ideal amount of counting to do.
100%. One-handed counting is the way to go. But yeah, I mean, if and I was thinking about this heading into Sunday's game. This was fun. It was a fun doubleheader on Sunday Night Soccer. Like I really enjoyed it. I had a good time watching MLS on Sunday.
They picked good games.
They did. They picked great games, even with the Galaxy's hilarity this season. Mm-hmm. I was thinking about it. Like, the Galaxy have gone past the previous point of no return in MLS, where we've never seen the team go winless through this many games and go make the playoffs in the current format. It hasn't happened before. So they're in uncharted territory, and we're all pretty sure that territory involves them winning the wooden spoon at this point. But if there was a moment to turn a season around, and maybe this is where you're coming from a bit, Taylor, if there was a moment for them to turn things around and make a different kind of history, a better kind of history that involves them making the playoffs after just being dismal and battered by injuries, and they get Ricky Puig back in August, and all of a sudden they have momentum and they win 12 straight games, and they make it to the wild card game, and they win the wild card game, and they make the playoffs. Who knows what can happen then, right? If there was a moment for that momentum to start, it was this game. It was El Trafico playing at home. That's the moment that you can see written up in the stories about the Galaxy turning their season around in October, right? Whenever we'd write those pieces because they finally clinched after decision day and an heroic performance there. This was the game for that. And that they didn't get the win, I'm totally with you. It feels like a loss. At the same time, even if they'd won, I probably would have said it kind of feels like a loss because this season in general has been a loss. LAFC, to their credit for them in this game, yeah, they're going to be disappointed too. Like, they probably feel like this was a loss as well. They're up 2-1. Takes a Marco Royce free kick in the 87th minute to turn this thing around for the Galaxy. LAFC were probably on balance, like the slightly better team after the opening 10 minutes of this game. The Denny Bouanga goal will catch the headlines. And I really loved what Taylor Twellman said after that goal goes in about how in El Trafico, it's a game where the stars deliver. Like Carlos Vela, Zlatan Ibrahimovic, you run through the list of guys, Denny Bouanga certainly. The stars deliver in these kinds of games, and that's part of what makes this, I think, by far the best rivalry in Major League Soccer. El Trafico is must-watch stuff for me in a way that no other rivalry is, even though I'm still going to be watching them. Like, Denny Bouanga's goal was awesome. It was Ryan Hollingshead's inverted left back, tucking inside, getting the ball on his right foot, threading a through ball to Nathan Ordaz. That really got me juiced in this game just because I'm broken inside, and that's just how it is.
No, Hollingshead looked great.
He did.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like so classy. That assist is so classy. So I got lots of time for that. I'm not worried about LAFC. I don't feel any differently about the Galaxy.
He tried a scorpion kick in the second half too, didn't he?
Because he's a baller, is what he is. Ryan Hollingshead's a baller.
He might be the best uncapped American player of all time.
Yeah, it's a great.
Like, if you look at like really the zero cap wonders for the U.S. men's national team, like, which is to say not for the U.S. men's national team, right? I have 0 caps for the U.S. men's national team, but of the players who went professional and have not been called up by the U.S. men's national team or anyone else, I don't know if any has actually had like a better career than Ryan.
He's huge.
I really
he's huge for them. Yeah. Absolutely huge. And I'm not.
He's that good.
I'm not worried about LAFC, even though they're up against the worst team in the league. Like, you would hope you're going to win this game. I always cringe
Form at the goes out the window in a derby joke.
That's exactly what I was about to say, Taylor, word for word. I always cringe at that because it seems like absolute baloney to me. Like, it just seems so. It's like nonsense to me.
Yeah,
it might be true with El Trafico. Like, this was the 25th edition of El Trafico. These games had averaged 4.29 goals per game in the previous 24 editions. We got 4 more goals this time. That technically lowers the average. These games are wild. They're insane. I think there is some truth to that old adage in this case. So LAFC are going to be fine. Galaxy are in the same spot they were, but, so it goes.
I look at...
Go ahead, Jeff.
Just one last thing quick on the Galaxy. A couple of things that are just kind of interesting. When you look at the numbers, this was the first time this season that the Galaxy took at least 10 shots in a game and put 40% of those attempts on target. The first time they've done that. That is generally what you would say is like decent team performance, 40% shot accuracy, take at least 10 of them. They have had trade-offs all season long. So this is the first time that they've kind of looked like a team that is comfortable with attacking, which is a good sign. The second thing...
Is it? That feels
it's bleak.
Like the lowest
but that's how
bar
bad
and
they've
faintest
been.
of praise.
Yes, it is. But that's how bad it's been, right? Like, this is another illustration of how bad it's been, and also how they can maybe take some positives from this game and say, we were able to do this against a team that is famously pretty good structurally under Steve Cherundolo, right? The other thing, keep in mind, this is a team that it does not have its first team in the U.S. Open Cup, so they're only playing on one front right now. They have 6 games between now and the end of June, and I think that they actually will feel pretty good about a lot of these matchups. They go to San Diego. That's going to be the toughest of the 6, I would argue. But maybe there is a point to prove after that really awful opener, the season opener that they had against San Diego, where they got embarrassed in Carson. Maybe they want to do some of that themselves. We'll see if they actually can. But then they host San Jose, so you've got Bruce Arena coming back with the Quakes. That's fun. But also, they're an incredibly defensively flawed team, too. So depending what Gabriel Peck feels like doing that day and how coherent his decision making is, and if Joseph Painsil can play more and all that sort of stuff, that's a good result, possibly. At home against RSL, another team that's struggling this year. Away at St. Louis, another team that's struggling this year. Away at Colorado, that's a tough one, but Colorado also leaks goals occasionally, and then they go to San Jose and go back to the California Classico for the second time in a month. They could get some points there. I think that if they're going to stop... Let me put it a different way. If they don't get more than 4 points from these 6 games, they are absolutely on record-setting worst team watch for the rest of the season. Because I don't know if you're going to find a stretch of games that's more favorable than what they're about to walk into.
Would you rather be on this Galaxy team or the 2017 Galaxy team that I believe did win the Wooden Spoon? So a potential Wooden Spoon winner or an actual Wooden Spoon winner? That one had the Dos Santos brothers, Giassi Zardes, right. Jermaine Jones, Robbie Rogers, Ashley Cole. Is that no?
I mean, I'd rather be this version of the Galaxy because I think we all think that they're going to be better next year. Even if you end up with the Spoon, even if you set the lowest point total record in MLS history, I'd still probably rather be this team because if Ricky Puig comes back, you're not going to necessarily be incredible right from the jump, but you're going to be better off than past versions of the Galaxy.
No Dos Santos brothers, no Jermaine Jones. Yeah, I think I'm sleeping a little better with this year's team. Personally.
Enough. All right, we'll take one more break. We'll come back. We'll talk about some more of Rivalry Week's best. Back soon.
Yes.
Welcome back to the Total Soccer Show. Joe Lowery. It was Rivalry Week this weekend. That is a hard phrase to say very quickly. I've now failed twice. Week 14, is that the obvious place to put Rivalry Week? It feels a little strange to me to wait this long, but at the same time, I did enjoy it. All the games were fun, so maybe it was the pep we needed. Where are you on this one?
Yeah, I mean, you can put Rivalry Week kind of wherever you want within the season. It doesn't really matter to me too much what the match day is. I did think it was odd, and I wrote about this for Backheeled. A couple things about Rivalry Week, which was fun and had fun moments. I thought it was odd that MLS split it across 2 different match days. So the first Rivalry Week technically started on Wednesday with Sporting Kansas City and St. Louis City playing in the Barbecue, which is a name that I'm going to try to make sure does exist for a long time. Drawing 2-2 on Wednesday. Not exactly like a fantastic kickoff to Rivalry Week. Then you move on and actually have the rest of the meet across Saturday and Sunday. So now it's taking place over 3 different days as opposed to trying to make it into an actual week, even though we all know that that's not what it means. And Saturday and Sunday were these big rivalry games across the league. You have energetic fan bases, teams that hate each other, all that good stuff. It's fun. It took place after the first full midweek slate of games of the season. We had not had midweek Wednesday games until almost a week ago now as we're recording, when Rivalry Week technically started, even though it didn't really. And so the result of that was you had a number of teams coming into Rivalry Week, into some of these interesting matchups, resting players. And you couldn't have RSL, or you didn't have RSL with all 11 first-choice guys against the Colorado Rapids with all 11 first-choice guys. Instead, you had Emeka Nelly on the bench, and you had Catranes on the bench, and you had Diogo Gonçalves on the bench for Real Salt Lake and Pablo Mastroeni. Not a pure rivalry game, but you had Bruce Arena and the New England Revolution, and the San Jose Earthquakes going back to take on the New England Revolution. That was genuinely incidental. You had that matchup, and Bruce Arena and his Quakes team had just played Miami, and they rotated all but one outfield starter for that game against the Revs. And that could have been a cool moment, and it feels like that just didn't register at all. I know making the MLS schedule is really difficult. I understand that. This starts years in advance. This is a complicated process. That Rivalry Week is supposed to be this big thing, and it was after a midweek set of matches where either you've rotated or your players are gassed or teams are in uneven circumstances where some have played 3 days earlier, some have played a week earlier. It just doesn't make any sense to me. Like, that timing doesn't make sense. And I know I'm picking nits here. At the same time, it should be a little troubling that, like, I don't even know how many folks out there knew that Rivalry Week started on Wednesday with St. Louis against Sporting Kansas City. Like, I'm probably the only one complaining about that because I'm one of the few people that knows that it existed. Like, MLS has few ways, I think, to make its regular season games feel like they matter to people that aren't already in the door. MLS regular season games do matter. Like, teams that finish up higher in the table do better in the playoffs. That's understandable. If you want to win games in the playoffs, you got to start winning games now. That's how this goes. But to the average fan, to the fan who's not already in the door, like, Rivalry Week's a great way to get them hooked, right? You can showcase your atmospheres. You can showcase games that feel energetic. And there were some nice games. Like, we've already talked about two of them. That Orlando-Miami game was fun. El Trafico was fun. You had these matches that had good energy and were high-quality matches. You get them in the door with the rivalry billing. You get them in the door with that, and then you have them watch the game, and they're hooked by the atmospheres and all the fact that the broadcasts look really good. And then you keep them around in future weeks with the fact that, oh, wow, this soccer is actually better than I thought. Like, I had fun watching this. That's great. Why not actually try to optimize all of that and make it into something that is the best it can possibly be? Again, I'm picking nits here, but MLS needs to make these things feel like they matter even more than they do. And, like, splitting the start, and St. Louis Sporting Kansas City is a legit good rivalry in this league. Putting that on a Wednesday, I don't know, just feels like bungled execution. How much it matters, I'm not really sure, but it matters to me, and it probably matters to a few other people out there. And it should matter to way more people than that, and that, I think, is a statement on where MLS is right now.
And I do completely agree with you. Like, it just, like, in terms of the double game week factor of it all, like, this is, I think, if you're going to schedule it in the first third of the season, do it when teams have a week of rest and preparation, because you're going to get your best games from that point. So, like, I don't think that it's, picky or anything like that. I don't think that you're being, pedantic about any of this either. To give MLS some credit, I do think something that's different over the last year or two is I think they actually know what the real rivalries in their league are now. And I think that they did struggle with that for quite a while, actually.
You mean DC and New York isn't the real rivalry that we all thought it was?
Maybe not as much, right? Like, and there's just that thing where
rivalry? Come on.
Yeah, it's one of those where it's like you have to recognize if New York fans aren't as gassed for that game as they are about NYCFC, like, you can't really force fetch to happen, right? It's just not going to happen. Like, if the Galaxy and Quakes looks amazing in historical footage but looks less interesting than El Trafico, like, you kind of have to take your picks for these sorts of moments of rivalry week. And even in the past, right, like, again, I'm based in Minnesota, they really tried to force, like, the nicest rivalry on earth. They even gave it a tagline that both clubs were like, this is weird, we don't like it, we don't think of each other as rivals, we just happen to be geographically kind of close in the same time zone, right? And now, of course, St. Louis City comes in, and that first playoff series sort of catalyzes something where it is an authentic rivalry. I mean, you look at what they put front and center this week, and I think all of them were really strong, just in terms of the, like, context and the narrative and the story. These things that MLS has struggled with historically, establishing narratives. To go back to Joe's point about clipping the Messi interview, Alex Abnos, friend of mine, former editor who now works at The Guardian, put out a really good column this morning talking about how, like, this is the sort of stuff that makes it more difficult for people to talk about the league. If you're cutting every clip where your superstar player criticizes officiating as his team continues to lose. If LeBron does this with the Lakers and the Lakers are out of the playoff picture, it is leading every single talk show the next morning on ESPN and FS1, right? But you look at the rivalries that you have here. Kansas City versus St. Louis. Yep, great. Montreal, Toronto. Still underrated. I don't care how bad the teams are any single year. I think that this is one of the best in terms of emotion.
And it ended 6-1 to Toronto, by the way. So this one did deliver.
Right, absolutely. It delivered. New York. Yep, sure, I get it. That's going to play, and that'll play even better when New York City has its own stadium. Columbus, FC Cincinnati, hell is real. Sure is. Dallas, Houston, like, yes, that's the right part of the, the Copa Tejas to really zero in on historically. Colorado, Real Salt Lake, Rocky Mountain Derby, great, no problem. Cascadia, you got a great little Brian Schmetzer quote that because it's a 1-1, I don't think really is going to circulate a lot, right? But, quote, it's the best rivalry in MLS, in my opinion. This is Brian Schmetzer after a 1-1 draw at Portland. I am proud of the guys tonight. They did a good job. It's been a long, storied history. Portland likes to say they're Soccer City USA, but I tend to disagree. We've done things better than them. Yes! Yes! More! I want more of this. And this is the sort of stuff that you do not get if you have Adrian Heath's Minnesota United against Sporting Kansas City's Peter Vermees, right? Like, this is not going to happen unless you actually have this sort of, like, tension and animosity. So I think overall, like, they're getting there. They found the right games to put in this. Just put it at a better time in the schedule.
Who is Atlanta's biggest rival?
Themselves. The ghost of 2018. That's their biggest rival. Yeah.
Because I kind of thought it was Orlando or Miami, but then you have those two playing each other, which makes me think
it probably is
Orlando.
one of those two. Yeah.
Okay.
Probably is, yeah.
Okay.
I think that MLS would love it if it could be Nashville, but I think in time Charlotte seems more likely for that one. I think Atlanta, yeah, I stand by it. The ghost of the 2018 MLS Cup winning team is their biggest rival.
What about St. Louis? Who do you think they consider
Sporting Kansas City?
rival?
No doubt.
It's Kansas City.
By a mile.
I think so.
All right. My favorite one, though, my favorite of all the games in Rivalry Week was Austin and Vancouver. Just because that was so clear.
Sebastian Berhalter derby.
The Sebastian Berhalter loan derby, yeah.
Well, I didn't even that. See, you all are on it. Mine was just that it's like, okay, we have like
we're sickos.
Dallas
we are.
and Houston. They're the Texas teams that are going to count. Portland, Seattle. They're the Cascadia teams. So
Yep.
We've got one Texas team left over, one Cascadia team.
It's
You're
a
now
leftover
rivals.
derby. Yeah,
Yes,
100%.
exactly.
And that's I mean, I think you guys have gotten to this well. We don't need to have 15 rivalries on Rivalry Week. Like that, you cannot have that unless the chips had fallen in just this incredible way that is so impractical. It didn't fall that way, and you don't need to force every game into being a rivalry. Some feel organic, and some don't. And some of these rivalries, even that are organic, I talked about how I think El Trafico is the best one. I have no doubt that Brian Schmetzer would disagree with me. I have no doubt that everybody in Portland and Seattle would disagree with me. And that is their right, because that is a fantastic game that has its own argument to it. I didn't think it was a good game over the weekend, and these games are always good. I didn't think I was enthralled quite like I was by Hell is Real or by El Trafico. That's okay. All these games are fun, and they can be their own thing to different people. That's totally fine. We just don't need to have, to the initial point you made, Jeff, these pretend games masquerade as rivalries. Like to MLS's credit, they put out a piece on MLSsoccer.com. I think they had 9 rivalry games in there, and they're the ones that we went through already. Those were the games that felt like rivalry games, and the other ones felt like regular MLS games. And that's okay. You don't need to have this ridiculous Twister-esque bending over backwards to try and make every game feel like something it's not. You can try to hype up some games more than others, and I think MLS has certainly got better at doing that over the years.
What was your favorite game of Rivalry Week then, Joe? Still can't say it.
It's okay. El Trafico was probably my favorite game of the bunch, but to hit on one that we haven't touched on yet, Hell is Real, I think, was a really good game, and two teams at very interesting places right now. Columbus hosting FC Cincinnati. Teams are, after this weekend in the 1-1 draw, second, Cincinnati, third in the East, Columbus. Philadelphia is first, and Cincy and Philly are tied on points. These two teams are really, really good teams. Two teams that are trying to find themselves still. So Cincinnati, Pat Noonan over the last few games has really settled on, I think, what is going to be his primary approach and settling into this 3-4-1-2 structure. And you've got Luca Oriano, who's now being asked to play as a wingback instead of as a forward, and I think that's where we saw him at his best last year. Evander settled into the number 10 position with Denke and Sergio Santos ahead of him. Cincy are finally starting to get healthy as well, which is a huge part of this. So I think Cincinnati coming into this game had sort of found their recipe, even if not their full execution. Columbus are still looking for that a little bit. Not stylistically, because we know how Wilfried Nancy wants his teams to play, but personnel-wise, where is it Jason Russell-Rowe starting up top along with Gazdag and Rossi? Is it AZ Jackson? Or is it, in this case, Ibrahim Aliou, who wasn't on my bingo card to start in this game, recently acquired from the Houston Dynamo? He started, and I thought actually looked pretty good. Didn't do a ton of shot-creating stuff, but he is quick. He runs in behind well. I thought his timing was pretty good on some of his off-ball work. He's somebody
Some players look better when they get on a better team.
100%.
And they have to do less, right?
And to raise that even, I'll call you and raise you, every player looks better on a Wilfried Nancy team. So that's a great place to start. Columbus started Aliou and Gazdag and Rossi up top, and Gazdag still hasn't really made much of any impact in Columbus, and the crew are still picking up wins. So Columbus are still looking to find themselves. They went down early in this game. They got a claw back. They end up scoring an equalizer penalty, which is a bit of an unfortunate one from Nick Hagland. Just kind of happens, hits the arm sometimes, and it goes to the spot. Rossi finishes, and this game ends 1-1. a tight match between two teams that both look good. I've got more Columbus stock than I have Cincy stock. But, man, if Cincinnati can actually rev the engine a little bit and take advantage of some of the continuity that they now have, and if Columbus can make Gazdag into something like he was in Philadelphia, yeah, they're going to be really, really good. The top of the East in general is just like a grinder right now. You look at Philly, Cincy, Columbus, Nashville are sneaky good still. They're fourth in the East. Then you have Orlando, who I'm like higher on now than I think I've ever been under Oscar Pareja. They look legit, and not just because they beat an old and tired Miami team. Then you have Miami in sixth, and I'm still not ready to count Miami out, despite all of their flaws. If they flip a switch, they're right back in this thing. So the top of the East in general is really, really good, and that Columbus-Cincy game gave us a glimpse at two of those teams quite intently.
Jeff, any thoughts on Hell is Real or maybe Cascadia, if you prefer?
Yeah, I mean, Cascadia, I think, look, that's a game that historically over the last more than 5 years. This goes back just before the pandemic. I'd say 2018-19, whatever it is. After both clubs finally won their first MLS Cups, right? So let's say after 2016, Sounders complete the Cascadian double, right? Portland wins, beats them to the finish line in 2015. They win in 2016. Okay. This game gets really cagey, like all the time. Like Stoke Millwall on a Tuesday levels of cagey, where it's just like, okay, great. We're just going to limit chances. We're going to try. Fans get upset because of MLS trying to kind of exploit their tifos and stuff for marketing. So then they start protesting, right? And they're not doing their tifos, and the atmosphere falls a little bit flat. And I think now it's to a better way. Jeremiah Oshan had a really good thing at Sounder at Heart. I highly recommend reading it, just about like his experience being in the away section of a Cascadia derby for the first time since before the pandemic, and just kind of like feeling it doesn't feel like there's that same sort of anger and tension around it that they're used to maybe have at times, but it still feels like everyone is at the edge of their seat more than any other game in the schedule of the regular season, and that's exactly what you want for a healthy and functioning rivalry. So, I think that's good. 1-1. Again, Portland, I still they're defending, and their just kind of mental lapses, I think, kind of continue to hold them back, and I still kind of have them outside of the top tier, maybe even 2 tiers of the West, but they're still picking up points. Good away point for the Sounders. The one that I will say is, if you want to watch a highlight package with like your lunch, your dinner, your whatever, and you just need to feel alive or something, watch Montreal Toronto, man. Like, that is so fun. Pop quiz for you guys. The scoring of this game is opened by the first overall pick in the 2024 Super Draft. Plays for Toronto FC. Name that guy.
Tyler Spicer.
Tyrese Spicer.
Half point.
It's one of those where it's just like, okay, I forgot about him. I forgot about the first overall pick from the Super Draft, and he scored in a rivalry game. 21st minute, Montreal down 1 already. Red card. Oh boy. And then the floodgates open. And then you just have like a lot of Toronto. And Montreal, to their credit, generating 2 XG worth of chances. Down a man. Down a coach, like, just remarkable stuff. Like, only I think 16,000 people reported attendance at Stade Saputo for that one, but like, very, very fun game where it's just like, yeah, okay, even when these teams are bad, they're going to show up for these games. And again, that's all you can ask for in a rivalry.
Jeff, quick follow-up question for me. What is the Super Draft?
It's
I know it definitely used to be.
I know, I'm just like trying to brush the dust off my memory banks here. I remember when that was like an in-person event. I still remember who was it? It was oh man, he used to he had a better career with the Charleston Battery than he did with New York. He was drafted in 2017. And he had this speech where he was just pretty much like, all the haters who passed on me are going to rue the day, and just you wait until, and then he did like very, very little in Major League Soccer. I'm looking up the draft list right now. It was Zico Lewis of the New York Red Bulls, picked 17th overall, and put out like just an all-timer of a super draft speech.
That's the energy we're looking for, frankly.
I miss that a lot. Yeah, he has 42 caps for the Bermuda national team. He'd already debuted for them 6 years before being drafted. It's fun.
It is fun. It is fun indeed, as was that game, as was this episode, gentlemen. Thank you both for talking about a lot of derbies, about a lot of dysfunction. It has been an enjoyable time with no dysfunction amongst the three of us, which is always a positive sign. Jeff Rueter, thank you for that, my friend.
Thank you.
Joe Lowery, thank you for the same. Joe Corona today, I should say, to give you your proper billing.
Working on Joe Heineken next time. Thanks, Taylor.
Ooh.
Listeners, thank you all so much. We very much appreciate it. Keep listening, keep supporting the show, and we'll talk to you again tomorrow.